Alright people, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way you'll know when I upload the next video and you'll be supporting my channel. Follow me on Twitter. Every time I upload a new video, I'll be tweeting. Ladies and gents, almost UX, and this is the Bronze Age Collapse, the Wheel and the Rod, actually part 2 by the channel Extra Credits. I saw the first part a day or two days ago. Obviously this was surprising. I did a poll on which next case I should do and people told me to do this. I thought like, Bronze Age, yeah, it collapsed. I didn't realize that it collapsed at a scale that it did. Obviously, you know, it didn't happen entire, you know, I guess global scale, not every empire fall, but I guess many empires basically disappear relatively around the same time. Right, Mycenaean Empire and you know even the Egypt one. Even though Egypt one kind of survived, but not the same way that it was. So it was fascinating to see that like how it affected many places. So there, you know, there could have been an unknown element like some kind of a I don't know, some people, tribal peoples, anything like Mongols, something that basically conquered and basically you know collapsed certain things because wars can collapse trade and economy, and wars doesn't just go away. So eventually eat everything around it. So that could have caused some kind of a dark age after that, you know, writing got forgotten and everything. So yeah, we'll see how this series ends. I'm pretty sure we don't know in reality what actually happened. So, but you know, Extra Credits will basically tell us, you know, what we know of and what's the best theory, I guess. It's gonna be fun. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more, I guess. Check out the reaction, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast, place in cards, and yeah, let's watch it. Check out the Twitter account. You know, I upload about 6-7 videos a day, and YouTube only sends 3 notifications randomly, I guess. There's no pattern to that even. So you might have missed one of the reaction videos that you wanted me to react to. And then I already reacted. So check out the Twitter account that, I'll be tweeting every time. So let's watch it.
The wheel turns. Ages pass, society becomes more advanced. Advancement leads to stability, to connection, to peace. But what happens when that's not true? Often, when we think of the ancient past, the times before the Greeks and the Romans, we think of a barbaric or a primitive age. But that age of barbarism we think of actually followed the late Bronze Age collapse. Before the collapse, there were societies that wouldn't be rivaled again for half a millennium. So today, let's look at the technology, social policies, and political structures that made these kingdoms so impressive. I kind of knew this about Mycenaeans, obviously. I didn't know that it happened in many places at once, Bronze Age collapse basically. But I didn't know about the Mycenaeans. After that, how Greeks came and everything. And because of that, I always had this theory, like, every time we obviously with a hopeful thinking think about how science is going to advance, where we're going to be in 100 years, 200 years, which star we're going to land on, which technology we're going to have. There's lots of idea on Kuzguzar channel about science and where it can lead to. But, I also had this cynical view, like maybe it could be something like what happened to Mycenaeans, but at our scale, basically, something like say World War III or something could cause our entire civilization to plummet at a pace that in few centuries we won't forget how we were, or at the technology. Even if there's technology left behind, we don't even know how to use them. That scenario can happen. I mean, that's just a terrifying thing, right? In the far future, let's say, if we had time travel right now, we went into the future like year 3000 or something, and everybody's like, tribal or something, or not even close to what we have. And we are assuming here they probably have some kind of a spacecraft that can warp travel or something. That would be so fucked up. Advanced, and that may, in the end, have led to their downfall. First, we have to talk about bronze itself. As we touched on last time, bronze is an alloy of tin and copper, and most of the Bronze Age world was missing at least one of those components. This meant that Bronze Age civilizations had to trade. And I'm not just talking about small-time exchanging of shinies. We're talking a full-on, modern-day, our society requires trade to function type of trade. Everything from farming to war depended on bronze, much in the same way it depends on petroleum today.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Globalized, internationalized system.
Well, right now it's petroleum. Soon it's not going to be on petroleum. I don't know why anytime somebody says oil, I think there is a guy with suits somewhere in USA just basically going, huh? Somebody said oil. Suddenly his antenna goes off.
Trade sprung up around bronze, and with it came trade in almost every other good. This was a positive thing. It allowed a material standard of wealth, especially for the nobility, that was unrivaled anywhere in the world, except maybe for China. This level of wealth wouldn't be seen again until the Classical Age. But it also meant that the kingdoms of the period were sort of like a Jenga tower. They stood tall, but if too many pieces got pulled out, that whole thing would come crashing down. So this interconnected system of trade, while enormously beneficial, may perhaps have also been one of the factors leading to the Bronze Age collapse. Next, let's talk war, because in this period, the chariot was king. Almost all the major powers of the time built their armies around a chariot corps of one type or another. And here's the thing about chariots. They're really expensive and they're difficult to use. You can sort
Wait a minute, expensive? It's a cartwheel with a horse. Why is it expensive? I don't know. Yeah, chariot. So everybody's like, what is this chariot? It's a cart that is tied to a horse, so you don't have to ride the horse and your balls are fine. They are not aching when you get off. Oh, I order 50 of them.
Sort of think of them like medieval knights. It takes a lifetime of training to use these weapons, and maintaining them costs a small fortune. This meant that, like medieval knights, many kingdoms had a hereditary warrior class that was dedicated to doing just this. But what happens if you lose a ton of those guys at once? You can't just replace them. It takes years to train a guy up to the point where he can be proficient with a chariot. And really? What happens if your economy collapses?
Because that long of a training to learn a chariot? I know chariot can be difficult. I mean, certain games like Assassin's Creed have basically, when you play it, you can only feel it like, oh, chariots are pain in the ass. Obviously, that's just a game. In reality, it must be even more pain. But it requires that much of a training. I guess, not just to ride a chariot, but be effective in them in a war. That must be a whole other level of difficulty.
You no longer have the spare resources to maintain a caste whose singular role is to train to use some complex weapon, much less to pay artisans to build that weapon and technicians to maintain it. And so, while this particular engine of war was highly effective in a time when we hadn't really bred horses big enough to carry a man in full armor, it was also a liability. If things went really wrong, you could no longer maintain this highly sophisticated military machine. And then what happens if you need to defend yourself? What happens if you face some outside threat? What happens if you have to fight, but your whole conception of what an army is no longer viable? And so, again, this very weapon that made many of these states so dominant is perhaps one of the dominoes that sets us up for the Bronze Age collapse.
It's like, imagine if today, if any economies would fall even, marginally, like, let's say United States fall from number 1 to, I said, number 7, not even that far off. And they lose the ability to make nuclear weapons or something like that. And every country knows this. If they fall off, they'll lose the ability to make nuclear weapons. They'll lose the nuclear weapons. That would be, panicky situation. I guess that was similar to this. Chariots are nuke in this sense, I guess. I don't know.
And since we're talking about armies, let's talk about the governments they fought for, because these were incredibly organized, incredibly centralized governments. The level of central control in the late Bronze Age states is almost mind-boggling.
Yeah, there should be another one on top of that. Ra, I guess. The sun god Ra.
Far, far beyond the monarchies of the Middle Ages, perhaps even more than many modern states, which is important because due to this centralized control, many of the late Bronze Age kingdoms were structured as command economies. Every piece of grain, every dram of olive oil, every bar of bronze was tallied by the central government. Farmers were told what to plant, where to plant, and when. Mines were state-run operations, and clearly this varies a bit from nation to nation, but from Egypt to Mycenae, you had top-down economies organized by the central authority. But what happens to a top-down economy when the top goes missing? If you're a laborer, and every year an official comes and gives you the seeds you're supposed to plant, and tells you when and where to plant them, what happens if that official just stops showing up?
What?
And this issue is compounded by 2 other pieces of technology.
That is really disastrous. It's not the other way around. It's not like, the farmer does all the job and I guess the state collects some taxes. No. State tells you how much to plant and where to plant. You're just basically just a machine in that sense. You just do what you're told, and that's you're the farmer in that sense, I guess. That is, like he said, is disastrous. Like, the top blows up. I mean, the whole economy crumbles. It is best if it's other way around, right? I mean, farmer do his job, does with farm the way he want to, and whatever output he has, state collects taxes and therefore just go from bottom to the top that way. In that sense, even if the government collapses, the country doesn't collapse. Farmers still do their farming thing now.
The first is irrigation. Bronze Age societies had very sophisticated irrigation systems. These were massive public works projects that took effort to maintain, and it took some element of centralized planning to build them efficiently to maximize crop yield.
I can already see him thinking, okay, so we are in this, heat with just a towel around my balls right now with a weird ass pickaxe, but you have a fucking blueprint.
After all, having every farmer dig their own irrigation is going to get way messier than simply laying out 1,000 plots at once. This was great, as it meant high crop yields, which in turn meant that you could support big cities filled with artisans, priests, warrior nobles, and bureaucrats.
Yeah, town planning works. Basically, this is equivalent to town planning. Rather than just chaotic thing, it's more organized that way.
Being able to support so many specialized positions in turn means more material wealth, a stronger government, and more opportunity for innovation. But what happens when that irrigation system gets destroyed, or simply stops functioning as efficiently? Well, then you've got a whole mess of people in your society who don't make food. And even ignoring the potential problems that arise from the fact that some of these people are very well armed, what happens when you can't support the non-food producers, but they're the planners who make this system run? The problem just compounds.
Okay, I'm pausing too much, but still, man, this is panicking me, this episode so far, because what he's describing is mostly what we are used to today. We are dependent on many things that if one of those things goes away, it's like a domino effect. I've said this in many videos in the past, like we might be thinking that, we are such a stable economy. Everything is true compared to every single event that happened throughout millennia of the past. We are way better off in every direction. But in the end, we are really, we are really held by small threads in the economy here and there. Imagine if in the United States, I guess they'll lose the power for 6 months. What do you think happened to the global economy in most of countries? How many people starves? I mean, in COVID, there was a real panic. Like if federal governments and federal people basically stopped doing their job and country literally stopped. I mean, there were lockdowns, but government and main jobs, the everyday jobs wasn't stopped, right? Federal employees were still doing their thing, right? Corporations and everybody's doing their thing. Imagine for 6 months, nobody can do shit because there is no electricity, irrigation, whatever. Just in one country out of the 200 countries. What happens to the entire global economy? How many people go starve? How many countries basically go bankrupt? We are held by small threads that if something goes wrong, like say somebody bombs a city, I don't know, somebody bombs London, I guess, and doesn't even destroy entire thing, just bombs it as a state, that it's a real crisis. Just one city in the entire world. Even that fucks up the economy at the stage that lots of countries go near starving capacity, I guess. That's just, this just basically be panicking me. Like, okay, this sounds very similar to us in a different way, but still very similar. Like it's a domino effect in many sense.
Until you have a runaway collapse. And that's not the only problem caused by using advanced irrigation to support an ever-growing population. First, there's the obvious issue of overpopulation. Even if your food supply can support a large number of people, can the rest of your infrastructure? There are health and sewage concerns. There's a question as to whether your economy can really employ all of these people. And of course, there's the question of whether you can keep these people from revolting. But there's also a less obvious problem with this type of intense agriculture, and that is soil degradation. Whenever you heavily farm an area, you leach out minerals, you create erosion, and you disturb the soil biology. Today, we do a great deal with modern farming techniques to avoid this, but the late Bronze Age was perhaps the first time that humans had farmed on this scale. And as we mentioned last time, while the Nile did bring with it rich silt that helped to restore the soil whenever it flooded, this just wasn't true of many of the other kingdoms. And so, silently, year after year, perhaps too slowly for anyone to really notice, crop yields decreased, and with them the ability to support the ever-growing population of the late Bronze Age states. And lastly, we have to talk about writing, because the Bronze Age world had come to rely on writing for everything from highly advanced record-keeping to international diplomacy. But a scribe is sort of like a knight of letters. They're amazingly powerful, but they're also expensive, and they require training from a young age.
I mean, what was the one of the extra credits video? I don't know which one I reacted with. I think it was extra, like history of writing or something like that. It's extra credits video. Basically, obviously, that said that the writing as a core began as that record keeping in society. Societies formed, so new issues arose. Like how do you keep record of things, record of every food and everything. That's how the writing basically started with the science and shit. So it's not surprising that after economies collapsed, writing basically went away.
And though history shows that having the written word propels civilizations forward, and that every small increase in literacy ends up rippling out into large increases in the well-being of a society over time, even this idea that we usually think of as a purely positive, beneficial technology creates a potential liability. After all, if your whole society depends on written records and on record keeping, what do you do when there's no one left to write the records? And so, piece by piece, the very complexity, the very advancedness that made late Bronze Age societies so impressive, so much better to live in than anything that followed for hundreds of years, also made them more fragile. As societies became complex, interweaving chains of trade, agriculture, education, and bureaucracy, the potential damage that could be caused by removing any link from those chains grew and grew. So join us next time as we look at what might have caused those chains to snap.
Yeah, see, the thing over here is obviously, this is like, those graphs, right? In stock market graph things. We peaked at that time around the Bronze Age. But obviously, this was the first time people were doing things at this scale. So some mistake or some, I guess, not knowing of things would have, made a collapse like it did. I guess that's one of those easiest way to summarize it. Like, economy was, going through the roof, but, lots of people didn't know what they were in for, I guess. So this is literally the first time, I guess, humans experimented on, at this scale, like how to do all these things. That's why, we can easily compare this Bronze Age society to our society. Obviously, it collapsed and then it rebounded and we are growing right now. But every time I see in that stock market graph that that it plummets and then goes back up again, and there's also a small plummet there. When is the small plummet coming? I guess you could see the world wars being that plummet, but I don't know. Next plummet could be even more devastating. Yeah, Bronze Age collapse. This is really interesting topic. I didn't thought they would be this interesting, but yeah, I didn't know that Mycenaeans and they are all considered the Bronze Age empire. I knew Bronze Age and Bronze Age collapsed or something like that. I never paid attention to that. I knew there was some society called Mycenaeans, Cretes, basically, who just went away with the great buildings and architecture that they used to build. Greeks basically took from that and just carried over from there to Romans and things. I didn't know that, but I didn't know Mycenaeans were one of the Bronze Age, empires. Yeah. Alright, people, if you like my next channel, subscribe, check out the next Sunday, there's a link in the description, check out the cards, so basically, and yeah, I'll see you next time.